You came on the show, and look, I was a believer then. I still am now that this game, it doesn't really matter where Georgia comes into this, where Florida comes into this. It's a rivalry game, but you felt pretty confident still and had every right to. Do you feel more confident this year or less confident than last year heading into this weekend?
Less. Yeah.
Less. Okay. And why is that?
Yeah. Well, Georgia's not as good, and that's the main reason. Georgia's not as good this year as they have been the last couple of years. Florida is about a game, maybe 2 games better than I think most people thought they would be, myself included. So, and I mean, I think Georgia will win. I don't think it'll be by the 14 or whatever the line is. I think it'll be, 7 to 10 point game, something. I think it'll be a close game, a competitive game for all 4 quarters.
What do you think the difference
even
maker
with the
is
line
be?
being moved to 14? I expect that it doesn't cover. I think this game is a 7 to 10 pointer. Neither team really can flex too much on the other, with the talent level being pretty even on both sides.
Yeah.
And what do you think
turnovers is the only thing that could, Graham Mertz has played well. I think he's only got 2 interceptions, something like that.
2 or 3.
If for some reason something happens with him and all bets are off. Same thing with Carson Beck. If Carson Beck turns the ball over 3 or 4 times, if Graham Mertz turns the ball over 3 or 4 times, somebody could win this game by 3 scores. But barring that, I expect it to be a pretty close and competitive game. I think Georgia, it's hard to tell. Maybe Georgia wins by 7. Maybe they're up by 7 and score late and win by 14. But I think it'll be a competitive game in the 4th quarter.
So, look, I think the noise, Georgia fans I'm just like Gator fans, I'm sure, in your comment. You probably haven't dealt with much Gator fans recently, just like any fan base, trolling fan base. When your team's not winning, you're not going to go pick on somebody else. But Georgia fans, they live in here. It's unreal. I think we've earned some Georgia fans. They enjoy the show as much as they possibly can. And between the hedges, he's a $2. I got your back, Big Lou. But what I have noticed, this is how I judge kind of the feel. Just like you use your audience to flip the helmets over, I use the audience in the chat to feel where the fan base is. And I think that's what Vegas uses to move the line back and forth. Your dogs haven't been as rowdy. It feels like the leash has been tucked back a little bit, meaning like you said, I think it is going to be a little bit closer. Florida's making people a believer week by week. As a Florida fan, there's still, I think, the unknown. Like, we've looked bad, but could we look worse or could we look much better? And I think Georgia has that same question. Like, you haven't looked bad, but you haven't looked great. So is this the team that we're going to get, or are we going to see the Georgia, what you've seen the past 2 years, kind of pop the lid off? Do you think there's still a ceiling for Georgia this year to reach, or you kind of you think you're finding your groove and it's not going to be what it hasn't been in the past? I think Carson Beck's better than Stetson Bennett. Do you agree with that? Two-part question here.
Yes, 100%.
So what's your reason for nerves? Is it the defense on Georgia? Is it you think Florida just looks a more sound football team? A little bit of both.
I think it's a combination. Georgia's defense clearly is not. In fact, I wouldn't describe Georgia's defense as dominant at all. I wouldn't even say like they're not as dominant as the last 2. They're not dominant at all. They're a really good defense, top 10, maybe top 5. But it's not like it has been the last 2 years where it's just like this smothering, just 3 and outs over and over again. That hasn't been the case at all. Every team we've played has put together good drives against Georgia. We're a little worse against the run, in particular this year, than we have been each of the last couple of years. These are first world problems. I don't want it to come off the wrong way, like Georgia's some horrible defense or something, but compared to where it was the last 2 years, it's not there. The inside linebacker play is down. There's no Nakobe Dean. There's no Roquan Smith. There's no Quay Walker. We don't have anything like that at inside linebacker. We don't have a Jordan Davis or Jalen Carter on the interior, which we've had for the last 2 or 3 years. We got good interior linemen. We've got good inside linebackers. We don't have a first-round interior lineman. We don't have a first-round inside linebacker. And, that's been the primary difference, I think. We still can't sack the quarterback, but we never sacked the quarterback, so that's about the same. We were just not as dominant, just not as, Georgia's defense had the ability to just take games over, and that's hard to do defensively. Like, your defense has to be on another level to take a game. Lots of offenses can take a game over. Quarterback can get hot, a running back can get hot, whatever. For a defense to take a game over, that you don't see that a lot, but Georgia had that ability over the last couple of years. They don't have that ability this year. Georgia wins this game or any other game, it's going to be primarily because of Carson Beck and the offense.
And that's what I was going to say. I said, look, I think the one big difference, though, from those previous teams is that, look, Stetson Bennett was a perfect Alex Smith. He's not going to blow any games for you, and he was able to keep things close and not make mistakes when anybody else would make mistakes. I believe Carson Beck would have made those mistakes, but your defense was so good, it didn't matter. Now I think Carson Beck gives you that advantage. Look, even though you're down a little bit on defense, I think, look, we've talked about it all week. I'm sure you've talked about it. I know you've talked about it. I saw your video a little bit with Brock Bowers going down, which I hate it. I mean, I love to see a team full force. Is it going to be a factor? And I think a little bit, and the reason we talked before you hopped on here is the line. And I think Georgia plays this way too, where the line plays a little more reactive. I've been talking with a previous Gator, Stephen Harris, about that. And the reason that's beneficial is your linebackers play back a little bit. With Brock Bowers running out, they have the option to roll on him versus having a cornerback play on him. With him being out, I think that is going to be an advantage for Florida. They should play a little bit more aggressive with Bowers being down. But again, this is where your offense, I feel, wide receiver wise, is probably the best it's been in the last few years too. But now running back wise, you're not there either. So it's weird. Like you've dropped down in other areas, but you've complemented it in other areas. So I think that's probably the unknown for Georgia right now, because your identity is changing a little bit.
Yeah. With the Brock Bowers thing specifically, I'm just not going to go down the road of injury excuses. I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
Is Georgia a better team without Brock Bowers? No. I mean, that's just an obvious no. Georgia is not better without Brock Bowers than they are with him. But Georgia's got multiple 4-star tight ends, weapons on the outside. You recruit in the top 5 for every player on this team was part of a top 3 recruiting class. Every player on this team, period. There's not a player on this team that was not part of a top 3 recruiting class. It's not a valid. I think both things can be true. Yes, Georgia is better with Brock Bowers. No, not having Brock Bowers is not a reason why Georgia might lose a game. It's just not. It's not a acceptable reason. I don't think. I mean, it's not the same. But A.D. Mitchell was our best wide receiver last year. He missed 9 of our 16 games. Jalen Carter was a top 10 pick. He missed half the games. The year before, George Pickens, who's one of the best receivers in the NFL today, had 3 catches in the postseason, 0 in the regular season. He didn't play the entire regular season. They trotted him out there in the postseason just to prove to the NFL he could stand up on his own. They threw him 3 passes. I mean, you just have to put the next guy in. The next guy ain't always as good as the other guy, but what other choice do you have? I mean, you got 85 scholarships. Every guy on this team was part of a top 3 recruiting class. Okay, so you're going to have to throw the ball to somebody else. You're going to have to run a jet sweep to somebody else. Oh, no. It's going to be some other 4 or 5.
I think it actually might be a good thing, though. I mean, look. I mean, you don't. I don't want to say that losing Brock Bowers is a good thing. It's not, right? It's certainly he was. If there's one thing I could say about Bowers is he might have been the only player on both sides of the ball in this game that had the ability to potentially take it over. Without Bowers, I don't think either team has a player that could come in and potentially take that game over, right? So now I think you're kind of bad. It doesn't make Georgia a lot worse, but it doesn't make them any better. Now, at that same time, he became, just looking at the games for Beck, it almost became the Beck to Bowers connection, where he was losing sight of some of his other weapons around him because he became so comfortable just looking for Brock Bowers and using that as a security blanket. It could very well be a benefit to take that one component out, and now Florida doesn't know who to focus on. And now force Beck to use his weapons, use the guys out of the backfield, because now Florida doesn't know who to shut down. They don't know where. Before,
what you just said, weapons, right? That's the big thing. Is you've got plenty of them. You got a plethora of them.
Yeah. Here's one. What you just mentioned is one area where you might get me to admit that potentially the Bowers thing could really, really matter. If there's a minute and a half to go to the game and we've got the ball and we're down by 4. We've seen, like, the Auburn game. It's just Brock Bowers. Who knows I don't know what's going to happen if Carson Beck finds himself in a situation like that. Overall course of the season, it's not like Carson Beck has leaned on Brock Bowers the entire. I think he's got 4 touchdown catches. I mean, I look, before Brock Bowers got hurt, I kept arguing with Georgia fans that that wanted Brock for Heisman. Like, the numbers aren't there. Like, I agree, he's a great player, but like, the Heisman is a numbers award. Even if you want to pretend it's not a quarterback award, it's at least a numbers and stats award. And I'm like, the guy's got 4 touchdowns. Like, he's not winning the Heisman. Just let it go. So he's done a good job of spreading the ball out, but when in critical situations, we have seen Carson Beck kind of use Brock Bowers as a security blanket a couple of times. And so I wonder what would happen if Georgia finds themselves in that position again, and he's forced to sort of look somewhere else there. But I mean, you go out this offseason in the transfer portal, you get the number 1 wide receiver from Mississippi State and Ra Thomas. You get the number 1 wide receiver from Missouri
Mizzou.
and Dominic
Yeah.
Lovett. You bring them in, you match them up with Ladd McConkey and Marcus Rosemy St. Jack on the outside. And I mean, you've got weapons there. And so probably going to have to run a lot less 2 tight end sets than anything, Florida has seen from Georgia in the last 2 years. With Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington, you had there's a lot of different ways you can use those 2 guys at the same time. And even this year with Brock Bowers and like the next guy, Oscar Delp, Brock Bowers can line up tight like a traditional tight end, but we've got the ability to split him out wide like a wide receiver. He can play in a slot. He can do all those different things. Oscar Delp can't do all that. He's a tight end. 90% of the time, Oscar Delp's going to be, on an inline tight end. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, 3-4 wide receiver sets, that kind of thing from Georgia. And the running game, like you mentioned, has not been anything great either. That's had more
pass.
Right. And the injuries there have had and are going to continue to have a way bigger impact on Georgia's offense this season, I think, than missing Brock Bowers will, because there's so many injuries. Even if all of Georgia's running backs were healthy, it's still the worst running back room Georgia has had since before Todd Gurley. So you're talking about 12 years ago. It's the worst running back room in 12 years. That's if everyone's healthy. And they're not, everyone's not healthy. So the running back situation, I think, from an injury standpoint, is more significant than the Brock Bowers injury. I like Oscar Delp. He's really, really good. He got 2 freshmen, Pierce Sperling and Lawson Lucky. They're really good. They're not going to make up for Brock Bowers. No tight end is going to make up for Brock Bowers. Have to be a group effort. This wide receiver gets 3 more targets. This wide receiver gets 3 more targets. This guy gets a jet sweep instead of Brock Bowers, that kind of thing. No one's going to take Brock Bowers' place. But
I think the biggest thing you nailed on the head is Georgia's faced adversity in the South Carolina game and the Auburn game, but they had the security blanket in Brock Bowers to go to. The one thing we were talking pre-show in that South Carolina win was a big game. You're facing some adversity is there isn't really. Ricky Pearsall's had a good game. Eugene Wilson stepped up when it's needed, right? We've had multiple guys step up, and Florida's faced that adversity. So if there's anybody that's been punched in the mouth and been able to bounce back, it is Florida. Georgia had it a little bit, but like you said, in those big moments, that's where Brock has really shown. But throughout the game, I agree with you. Carson Beck is slicing and dicing wherever he wants to throw the football because of the talented wide receivers that you have. But things change when you're feeling pressured, your back's against the wall. You go to your security blanket, that's no longer going to be there. And that was something that we were kind of talking before you hopped on too, is bringing pressure to Carson Beck and forcing him to make a quick decision, something he hasn't really had to deal with this year, and hopefully forcing a turnover, which is going to be, like you also said, the key factor to this game. I do want to read this comment. It says, Chris Rowley says, Lou getting old and wise. What do you say to that, Lou? You got your clips of, and I think we all have. I feel like, it's tiring sometimes to be rambunctious. Is it old and wise? Couple of options. Is it old and wise? Is it tired because you just got finished watching soccer, which can be boring? Or is it you're just the nerves getting to you?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Look, I can give it to you any way you want it. I mean, I'm giving my honest opinion on the game. I think Georgia wins a close game. I mean, I get nervous about every single Georgia game that's ever been played. Period. It doesn't.
Amen.
That's always the case.
Sure.
And I don't think Georgia's going undefeated. I think they're going to lose one of their next 4 games. And
it's Saturday. You're thinking Saturday is going to be.
Yeah, maybe it's y'all's turn to scratch the lottery ticket and y'all beat Georgia. I don't think it matters which of the 4 games Georgia loses. Y'all are losing to LSU. Y'all are losing wherever else you play on the road. I mean, it's whatever, Mizzou. So it doesn't matter. But y'all, last year y'all were. Was it last year y'all were ranked? When was no in the offseason, y'all were ranked 28th for 1 week in the offseason. That's right. Florida was ranked 28th for 1 week in the offseason. So you'll be tied for first place in the East for 1 week, and I'll make up a t-shirt and I'll put it on there and I'll sell a bunch of them and it'll be great. Y'all will be happy. You can run around for 5 or 6 days. Remember last year when Tennessee was number one for a week? So, I mean, I can turn that on if you want me to, but I thought, I thought you want me to come on and talk some real football. I mean, I can do that too. I mean, Graham Mertz is a trash can, whoopity fucking dude. A guy can complete a bunch of 3-yard passes for 80% completion percentage. Whee!
There we go.
I mean, my God, build a statue, put it right next to Steve Spurrier down there. I mean,
there
give
he
me
is.
a break. No way anybody's watched Florida all year and go, oh, Graham Mertz is a Heisman candidate. I've seen some of y'all think he is a Heisman candidate. You're out of your damn mind.
So hold on. Beck or Mertz? We talking stats? I mean,
if we're talking stats, it's not even close. It's Beck. Beck's fourth in the country in pass yards, 75% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, it's not comparable.
Mertz is at 78. I mean, what's passing yards, Steve? Steve had it pulled up earlier.
Let's see.
It's closer
here.
than you think, Lou. And we don't have Ra Thomas and Brock Bowers on our team either. Okay.
Graham Mertz has 1,900 yards. Carson Beck has 2150. Graham Mertz has 1,900 yards. Carson Beck has 2150.
Yeah, Carson Beck's fourth in the country. Graham Mertz isn't. So
here's another interesting statistic. The quarterback ranking for Graham Mertz is a 163.7. Quarterback ranking for Carson Beck a 163.8. So